Okay, everybody. We're going to start with a hymn this morning. You can either turn in the Friends hymnal to number 28, or it's going to be on the screen. Immortal, invisible God, only wise. And let's stand as we sing this morning. And Christy's going to help lead us.
Either page 27, 28 in the pretty green book, or in the brown book, it's page 33. So, or the screen is a good choice.
Yeah, it's on the screen, or page 27 in the red hymnal, or 33 in the red hymnal, and 27 and 28 in the Friends. Okay, let's see. Great song for this morning. All right, you can be seated. And then the next song is Breathe on Me, Breath of God. In the Friends hymnal, it's number 135, and it also is going to be on the screen. Breathe on me, breath of God, fill me with life anew, that I may love what thou dost love and do. And then number 137, teach me to stop and listen. Teach me to stop and listen. Teach me to center down. Teach me the use of silence. Teach me where peace is found. Teach me to hear your calling. Teach me to search your word. Teach me to hear in silence things I have never heard. Teach me to be collected. Teach me to be in tune. Teach me to be directed. Silence will end so soon. Then when it's time for moving, granted that I may bring to every day and moment peace from a silent spring.
Well, thank you, worship team. That was great. There's kind of the standard announcements this morning. Workshops are up there. FUM will be in the chapel here at 2. Everence will be in Friendship Lodge, which I see Steve walking in right now. Hey, Steve. Everence will be at 2 p.m. up in Friendship Lodge. And then Right Sharing of World Resources will be on 4 p.m. here in the chapel. I think we're going to have some weather this afternoon, so workshops will probably be better attended. And I figure in between those, we'll probably put some World Cup games on. We'll have board games around probably here and in Friendship, maybe in the game room down there. So we will no doubt find some things to do. And we need some folks. We're doing some homemade ice cream in the pavilion, which is kind of on the other side of the dining hall. It is covered from the rain. So if you want to contribute to that and crank an old-fashioned ice cream machine, you're welcome to participate. That'll be at 4 p.m. And we're scheduled for a tour of the new cabins at 3 p.m. with Pat. I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll see. That will be weather permitting for sure. Same with the work party. So we'll see how it goes this afternoon. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Peggy.
May I invite friends, if you would like to greet friends who are not here, you may go over here. I have a stack.
Yes. So Peggy still has her...
I don't want to send things out with your signatures on it.
Yes, so there's still stacks of letters for friends who are not able to be with us. Sign your name on there, maybe leave a little message, and Peggy's going to handle sending those out. So thank you very much, Peggy. And sorry, I thought you were trying to listen, not raise your hand. I just didn't notice that. Okay. Yes, Betty.
I say that little kids want to do crank. It's best for them to come and crank at the beginning because it gets harder the longer it goes.
That's solid advice. Okay, so if you think your kid would like to do that, bring them early to the ice cream crank. Any other announcements folks have?
Just anybody that's interested in seeing what an old time engine looks like.
Yes. You don't necessarily have to crank. You can just come down and see it and be impressed. Okay.
That's for older kids.
Yes. Yes. Okay, well, today we're picking up our place in the spices, and we're going to be hearing about integrity from Alicia McBride, who's been nice enough to join us from Friends Committee for National Legislation. Alicia is FCNL's longest serving employee, so very well seasoned in the FCNL tradition. And she's one of those people who's kind of at every event. If you're traveling around in the Quaker world, always a delight to see. Possibly moving to Richmond, so we'll be in the Indiana area, which would be great. And we're very excited to have her with us this morning. So thank you, Alicia.
Good morning, everyone. Is this working?
I need to pull it a little closer and make sure the little switch is on.
Is it on? Yes. All right. Is that better?
Yeah, you hold your head just like this.
So it's wonderful to be with you. I'll say a little bit about FCNL and what I do, but as with others, that's not the main thing I'm talking about. I know many of you are familiar with FCNL, but the Friends Committee on National Legislation is a national nonpartisan Quaker organization that lobbies Congress and the administration to advance peace, justice, and environmental stewardship. And we are well connected with friends across the country through our governing body, our general committee, which I know some of you are serving on. We actually have two people on our executive committee here, Megan and Beth. So more people to talk about FCNL with if you'd like. And my role is I'm the Senior Director for Quaker Leadership. And so I get to travel and talk with friends around the country about advocacy and the ways that that can be part of living your faith in the world. I also get to talk with people who are advocates who are not Quakers, but who are connected to FCNL about Quakers and what we do and, you know, how to what it means when we're in silence and what a clearness committee is and all of those things. So I do a fair amount of Quaker education as well. It's been incredibly enriching to be here, and I'm kind of glad I'm going not too late because I think I would have kept adding little bits from everybody else's remarks and messages. So a few weeks ago, I was in Richmond, Indiana, at the memorial service for Mary Garman. Mary was my bonus mom, which is what I call her because I don't like the phrase mother-in-law. It has too many negative connotations. She was also a mentor, a teacher, and a cheerleader on my journey to recognize my work as a form of ministry. And among the stories told at her memorial, one kept returning to me as I was preparing to talk to you all about integrity. For a period of time before the Supreme Court upheld marriage equality, Mary stopped officiating weddings. For her, this was a matter of personal integrity. Some people had access to the legal and social protections of marriage, while others didn't. Under those circumstances, she didn't feel like she could participate in that system. I know in this yearly meeting that is a tender issue, this question of marriage equality, but whether that is something you personally agree with or are struggling with, I think we can all agree that Mary's concern was a decision based on what she felt was right and how she was called. So integrity is one of those concepts that comes up a lot among Quakers. It's one of our testimonies. But what does that even mean? When I was talking with Tom about this, he said, integrity is one of the hardest ones because it can mean anything. But it's one of my favorites. So this morning, I want to consider this testimony more deeply. What does it mean to have integrity as a friend? And what does integrity mean for our Quaker meetings, churches, organizations, and institutions? I have a particular interest in this question of what makes a Quaker organization authentically Quaker. What happens when we as friends live out our testimonies in the world at that really uncomfortable boundary where faith and action meet? How is Quakerism more than a brand or a tradition or a set of values? I'm going to talk more about values later. And I realized as I was thinking about why integrity connects so strongly to me, and that's something that has really, I've had, I think, 6 different titles at FCNL in my time, but a real thread through them is this question of how is FCNL and how are our Quaker organizations Quaker? And I realized that integrity is a strong part of my Quaker origin story. I was raised in the Episcopal Church, was baptized, confirmed, played in the handbell choir. And then when I was in high school, my family left the church that I had grown up in because the minister was speaking one thing from the pulpit, preaching one thing about Jesus and love and equality, and was acting in a way that was not consistent with that. And my family felt that they could no longer be part of that church. And so my mother started going around, and we wound up at a Quaker meeting. So that's how I first came to Quakers. So as we talk about integrity, I want to start by offering a metaphor to clarify what I mean. And this metaphor draws on a model developed by Dr. Daria Funches, which I first encountered in a workshop led by Neonu Span. And you may wonder why there's a picture of a water lily up on the screen. I will explain. So imagine a water lily, or I realized this morning there are water lilies down in the lake, so you can go look at one after this if you would like. So there's that leaf and the flower that's floating on the surface of the pond. That's the thing you can see. And depending on how clear the water is, maybe you can start to see that stem that's holding up the flower. And then down at the bottom of the pond, there are the roots. They're growing in that sediment, and they're supporting both the stem and the flower. Yes. So here comes the metaphor. The flower is what others can see. It's what we do. It's the actions we take. It's how we show up in the world. The stem is what we say about who we are. I'm the kind of person who does this. I believe this. What bumper sticker do I have on my car? For an organization, that might be our mission statement or our About Us statement on our webpage. And then we have those roots. Those are the core assumptions, the core beliefs, the things that we are grounded in. All 3 of these parts of the water lily need to be aligned for the flower to bloom. The roots support the stem, which holds up and nourishes the flower. Out of our secure grounding, our words and actions align to testify to our beliefs. And when all these pieces fit together, we have integrity. So let's talk about those roots. In this original model, the roots are described as values or core beliefs or our worldview. Those are indeed things that people can root themselves in. But as friends, our roots are deeper and wilder. We are rooted in what we experience when we center down and listen to God. You can go to the next slide now. So in the Pendle Hill pamphlet, The Testimony of Integrity in the Religious Society of Friends, Wilmer Cooper draws a clear distinction between values and testimony. He writes, "Values are projected ideals or goals which are rationally determined, whereas Quaker testimonies are derived from religious faith and experience fashioned out of a life of prayer, devotion, and worship, joined with spiritual discernment and commitment." More succinctly, in his consideration of Quaker testimony, Paul Buckley writes, "Values are things we decide on. Testimonies are products of the inward light." We have integrity when our words and actions are rooted in that experience of the inward light and when we are faithful to it. We testify in all sorts of ways when we have integrity. To come back to Mary Garman, what we can see is her action, not to perform marriages. In declining requests, she shared her discomfort with a system that allowed some couples to get married and denied others that right. What was going on in the roots? Unfortunately, I never had a chance to talk to her about it, but knowing Mary God, or Gad, as she would say in her Chicago accent, was involved somehow. You can go to the next slide. So in the book of Matthew, chapter 7, Jesus uses architectural rather than botanical language, but he's getting at a similar idea of the importance of action stemming from God's teaching. He compares a listener who acts on his words to a wise man who builds his house on a rock. Despite the rain and the wind, the house stays up because its foundation is strong. Those who hear Jesus' teaching and do not act, on the other hand, are like a foolish man who builds on sand. When those same storms come, the house falls down, losing its structural integrity. Next slide. Integrity is what happens when we hear God's word and put it into practice through thought, word, and deed. The house holds up. The flower blooms. Simple, right? It reminds me of one of my favorite descriptions of Quaker worship from Michael Burkle in his book, Silence and Witness. Quaker worship is like flying a jet. You take off, you go somewhere, and you land. You quiet yourself, you encounter God, you refresh and perhaps redirect your life. This is what we aspire to as friends, to be directed by that inward teacher, to live a life consistent with the promptings of that still small voice. This is not a solo project. We need all the help we can get from those around us to discern, to seek clearness, and to test what right action with integrity to the promptings of Spirit means. As Paul Buckley notes, the voice of the inward light may be infallible, but our ears are not. We need community. And if you are getting the sense that all of these testimonies aren't connected, I think that may be one of the points of this. There is also an important role to recognize that infallibility with humility and grace for ourselves and others. We are humans, we are impatient, and we make mistakes. We might think we know where we're going, where God is directing us to go, but sometimes, often, we get off track. When my son Howard was little, his solution to every challenge was to run headfirst at it as fast as he could. I had to tell him he was not allowed to play football because he was like the classic child that would get recruited to play football. Sometimes that was literally his solution. He did once knock down Mary, his beloved grandma, while trying to give her a hug. She fell flat on her back. But sometimes he just needed to have an answer immediately and would not be able to let go until he got one. As his mother, as the people around him, this was not always the best way to solve problems. Quakers call this tendency outrunning our guide, when our words and actions get ahead of God's direction. Maybe this looks like our water lily flower starting to drift away from its roots. We need to be able to notice that drift, accept that it's happening, and come back to the center. As St. Benedict wrote in his rule, always we begin again. So when I talked about Mary's actions around marriage, I had to speculate about the roots. It might be obvious, but we don't know what's happening under the ground, literally or spiritually. In our own lives, we may feel the alignment that signifies right action, that sense of spiritual snapping into place. We don't always have that same insight for other people. There's a challenge in that, but also a beauty. Each of us shares our encounter with the divine, refracted through the lens of our own identity, experience, and unique perspective. Our roots grow in the same soil, but our blossoms are different. The picture on the screen right now was sent to me by my colleague at FCNO, Lauren Brownlee, as I was working on this message. This is a bush in Hawaii that she saw, and if you can see, the flowers are different colors, but it's the same bush. When we come together and share how we experience the divine, seek clearness together on how we are led, our perspective widens. We encounter God in new ways. Our hearing sharpens. Yet, because we can't see what's happening underground, there can be a tendency to focus on what we can see, the flower or the fruits of our actions. We can mistake what we do with what it means to be a friend, and to focus on the purity of our actions at the expense of a focus on the faithfulness of our leadings. This connects with what Sean was talking about if you were here on Sunday evening, that bounded set based on a set of external rules and behaviors, as opposed to a centered set that is centered on hearing God and responding. This is, of course, not just a modern issue. I know that my Quaker meeting wrote people out of the community for fighting in the Civil War or for marrying outside of the Quaker faith. For a fictional take, the novel Flowers from the Storm by Laura Kinsale is, among other things, it's a romance novel, but it's great, a fascinating story about God and human love at one of these high judgment times in Quaker history. Today, someone might talk about how they're a bad Quaker because they don't go to church every week, or because they order from Amazon, or because they avoid talking to the annoying person next door, or because they pay their taxes, even knowing that money supports US war and imperialism. And maybe that's true. Maybe they are not acting faithfully to how they are led. Maybe they are not seeking to practice integrity and bring their words and actions into alignment with what they hear from God. Or maybe they are trying. They are doing the best with what they have in the situation they find themselves in. They are listening with their fallible ears and discerning how they are led to live a life that testifies to their particular divine calling. And maybe that call is more than a set of rules that we expect people to follow to be a good Quaker. Next slide. So, one more quote from Paul Buckley's reflection on the testimonies. Ultimately, there is only one testimony: to faithfully follow the word of Spirit breathed within our hearts. What may be named as separate testimonies are merely different flowerings from the same root. We testify to our integrity ultimately in the ways our lives testify to the world. So I'm going to put that water lily image back up as we make a transition from personal integrity to organizational. So far I've been talking about personal integrity and how each of us might demonstrate our experience of the divine. And I've noted that those personal leadings happen in community. Now I want to come back to the idea of integrity, not just in community, but as community. So here's another story, this one from FCNL. In the aftermath of 9/11, foundations were concerned that they would be accused of financing terrorism. They began requiring grant recipients to certify that their board members were not part of a terrorist organization. FCNL's executive committee discerned that FCNL would not comply, even if it meant losing foundation support. Instead, they decided they would send a letter, along with their grant requests, explaining why they were not complying as a matter of conscience. As with Mary's decision not to perform weddings, we can notice the layers of action, explanation, and leading. We can also imagine the judgment from someone who, on the one hand, wonders why FCNL is engaging with this compromised system in the first place, or on the other, why they are jeopardizing money that could do good work. As with personal integrity, corporate integrity requires cultivating our spiritual roots. We need to consider where in our meetings, churches, yearly meetings, organizations, and schools are the spaces where foundational deep listening and worship happen. How are we building relationships, trust, and common understanding? How do we help people distinguish their personal opinions from the pull of the divine in discerning the next right step for the group? Once we know how we are led collectively, we also need to have the courage to say it and to act from that knowledge in an environment that may be less than ideal. I mentioned my interest in that uncomfortable boundary about how we live our faith in the world. So here we go. In Matthew chapter 10, verse 16, Jesus sends out his disciples into the world, like sheep among wolves. Therefore, he tells them, be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. This is our work as friends to do, to understand the world, to interact with it, but not to be co-opted by it. It's part of why I became a friend, to expand my faith beyond what happened in 1 hour, in one building, on one day of the week. In some ways, Jesus is describing an impossibility. Snakes are predators, doves are prey. How are we meant to be both? I think this is one of those tensions where there's no right answer and all of our responses might look different. And that is the challenge of being a Quaker in the world, and even more so the challenge of being a Quaker organization or yearly meeting or school, trying to function in a complex web of laws, norms, expectations, and conventional wisdom. Our meetings and churches own property, pay taxes, and hire employees. Our schools face financial pressures and receive endless advice on how to, quote unquote, compete. Our organizations like FCNL interact with and work within political systems that are often unjust. The world is a messy place to be. It can be easy to be swayed by the assumptions and norms around us, to feel we have to just go along, to be shrewd but not innocent. How do we navigate without becoming unmoored from our roots, having them migrate from rock to sand, maybe without us even noticing? How do we keep alignment and witness to God's message with integrity? Our organizations and institutions need the touchstones of worship, discernment, and spiritual grounding to be able to recognize when conventional wisdom or cultural norms might diverge from the roots of God's message to the community. Sometimes an organization might choose to go along with the norms, as when FCNL chose to ask for grant funding, although in its own way. Having influence in the world means that we can't opt out entirely or die on every hill. But it's important that those are choices that are discerned, that we don't just fall into a direction because it's where we think we need to go. All of our choices speak about who we are and how we are aligned with the promptings of Spirit. Every time we do this challenging work of acting from a grounded place, of grappling together to discern the next faithful step we can take with integrity, we build our spiritual capacity to do it again. In her book, Against Purity, Living Ethically in Compromised Times, the anthropologist and philosopher Alexis Shotwell asks us to consider how, under conditions of oppression and exploitation, we might enact practices of freedom that can help shape worlds we currently cannot imagine. When we faithfully listen to and follow the promptings of Spirit with integrity, we can be part of shaping that world. So as I close, I'll offer some queries as we settle into worship. Who models integrity for you? When have you acted in alignment with God's call? And how does your meeting, church, yearly meeting, or Quaker organization embody the call to be shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves? My wish for you is that your roots grow deep and your actions shine bright.
who models integrity for you. Our speaker has given us several illustrations, and some of them have to do with her own, quote, bonus mom, Mary Garman. I'd like to think, and I realize, I think I know, that Western Yearly Meeting had a very important part in encouraging two young, recent converts to Quakerism in their public ministry. That was Mary and David Garman, who served at West Indianapolis Month Meeting, also known as Second Friends, in ministry at the turn of the 70s into the 80s. And that monthly meeting recognized their gifts in ministry, recommended them to Western Yearly Meeting, and they were recorded together at the sessions in 1980 in a very hot summer held at Marian University, the only time to that date since 1858 that Western Yearly Meeting had met away from Plainfield. It was a memorable time. There were evacuations. It was so hot. There were people fainting on the campus, band, whatever. But the Quakers held forth in the cool of the air conditioning. Howard Macy was our main speaker. And we culminated on Sunday morning with the recording service when David and Mary were recognized. And that was their only service in Western Yearly Meeting, but it was an important one, both for us, because it produced other people like Bob and Hope Carter, who went out into ministry in the world. It also encouraged David and Mary to go on and be what they became: teachers, chaplains, models in communities where they lived. And it was important for us because we saw that model that is important, and we recognized it and encouraged and sent those out into the world. And I know that those of us that were there at that session well remember it, and I'm sure everyone in this room has a highlight of someone or someplace they have been when that same model of integrity was recognized. And I appreciate the fact it's been brought to our attention this morning.
acting in alignment with God's call is a challenging thing because it can take you in a lot of different directions. I took a break from pastoring at one time and was working with a social service agency, and it was a wonderful job doing good things with people. Really enjoyed it. An opportunity opened up to work for another social service agency, and I was sure it was God's call. It was, on paper, a faith-based, Christ-centered organization. And I said, wow, this is good. This will be great. These will be great people and a great place to work and do good. Discovered it was just on paper. It was discouraging. They were making decisions in very poor ways, and it just never worked. So after about 9 months, I said, I'm sorry, this is not the right place for me. I'm not the right person for what you're doing, and had to leave. I was sure it was, but it wasn't. But it was good because I learned a great deal about myself, learned a great deal about what God is trying to work out. And actually, God continued to call in some very good ways. But acting on God's call is risky, is challenging, and is more than worth it. We have to be listening to him. We have to understand. We have to know that we have a God who loves us deeply and wants good for us. And the good news is that particular organization has been transformed. They rediscovered why they existed, and they're doing good things. And so I praise God for what is going on there, because they got around to finally acting on God's call.
A few years ago, I was attending Meeting for Business at Clear Creek Friends, and they were discussing the implications of having a television screen in Meeting for Worship to accommodate attenders by Zoom, and it was a very hot topic. And the meeting went for, I think, a little under 3 hours. And if you're a Quaker business nerd like me, you might get excited at the prospects of sitting in and hearing what Michael Burkle has to say and what Mary Garman might say, and just these weighty, mighty, giant friends. And there wasn't much unity in the room, and friends were disagreeing, but they were pleased to be together in community and discerning that. And in the meetings for business I attend now, I see none of this. My sense is we do everything we can to avoid bringing things before the body. And it's like, what are we doing as friends if we are not trying to discern how God is leading us? And I pastor in a meeting where we don't have a shared understanding of God, and we have friends who are atheists and agnostics and Buddhist. And I feel a great compassion for these friends. I have been there. And the stumbling block before us is if we cannot talk about God or have a greater sense, a sense of something greater than ourselves, then we cannot have a sense of the meeting.
I'm actually not a Quaker. I've only recently started looking at the various things that have been coming here, going to services, both programmed and unprogrammed, looking around at the various things. It's my experience in the Episcopal Church that I came from. I thought to myself, this is so different on every level possible, it seemed like. But every time I examined things, I knew and I saw around, doing things together, working with people was always something that was in the spirit of God. And it was uncomfortable. It was strange. Sitting in silence for even a half hour when you're not used to it, when you've done nothing but go to mass for a year, it's so almost uncomfortable, the silence. But if I were to just ignore that uncomfortability, if I were to just pretend it wasn't there and walk away from it, I wouldn't have had half of the spiritually enlightening experiences I've had while I'm here. It has completely changed, in my eyes, my conception of self in a lot of ways, and made me, I think, a much more in-depth examination of what's going on. But that required confronting that kind of uncomfortability, an uncomfortability that is almost like hard to really push past, a rock just right in front of you, but you have to move past it. There is something greater about that. And acting in alignment with God's call always ends up requiring dealing with that kind of uncomfortability all the time, no matter how it takes the form. And I'm always grateful for every time that I have.
Integrity. In the recovery community, we translate that as just do the next right thing, one at a time, just not being overwhelmed by the big picture, just the next right thing. And then we do that again and again and again. I think I'm going to go back to my meeting and just do the next right thing and not get overwhelmed with the big picture of it all. One person at a time, one thing at a time, and be at peace with that and the integrity within myself. Praise God how it builds character. I have so many character defects, but one next right thing at a time. Praise God.
I think for myself, my first model of integrity is Jesus Christ. And as I came to know him as my Savior as a young person, I have found that as I made decisions, I came to realize the only one that I need to please is him. And that took all the pressure off of me because, you can't make everybody happy. It's impossible. And so as I evaluate what I feel God is calling me to do and how I'm to interact with the people around me, my uppermost goal is to please Jesus and to walk in his ways. And his word, the scripture, guides me in that, as well as the Holy Spirit. And so that brings me peace, and I hope that brings you peace too.
Sometimes the issue of how do you discern God's call becomes a significant issue for those who really want to walk in integrity. We want to be faithful to how the Lord is leading us. But if you don't know which way he's leading, that can become quite challenging. And I know we've all been there, and we want to see the handwriting on the wall, and God just isn't doing that. And we pray and we seek guidance, and there's silence in response. And yet we want to be faithful. And at the risk of embarrassing my wife, I was there when I was dating this young woman who felt called to serve the Lord in medical work in Africa. And I had the same sense of calling. And we really enjoyed being together. And I, for quite a long time, was asking the Lord, are you calling me, are you calling us to join our lives together? And I just got silence in response. And I didn't want to get ahead of my guide. And so I just stayed quiet in terms of we never talked about marriage or anything. I won't go into the whole story because there's not time, but there came a point in time where we were driving separately in separate cars to the same destination. And I was once again asking the Lord, what is your will in this relationship? And finally, the Lord spoke up. And what the Lord said was totally unexpected. And that was, I want you to decide. And said, Lord, I'm willing to decide if you'll just let me know which decision you want me to make. And the Lord responded again, I've already told you, my will is that you decide and that you do it now. Before you get to the place where you're going, you decide. And that took, I don't know, maybe out of it, it had to be either yes or no. And of course, you know the end of the story. But what that taught me, as I reflected on this later, is that the Lord wanted me to know what He had put in my heart. Because then I was faced with, it has to be either yes or no. And I didn't want it to be no. I wanted it to be yes. And the Lord was saying, I have put good desires in your heart, good things in your heart. If you're going to join your life to somebody, don't do it out of a sense of duty to me. Do it because I've put the love of that person in your heart. Act out of what I have put in your heart. And this is one of the reasons, I have many favorite Psalms. This is one of the reasons that Psalm 37 is one of my favorite Psalms, one of the many. Verse 4, which tells us that if we make the Lord our heart's number one priority, we can trust the desires that He puts into our hearts. Exalt in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. He will put into your heart the good desires He wants you to have, as long as the Lord is your number one priority. If anything comes before the Lord in the priorities of your heart, you can't really trust what you find in your heart anymore. But as long as He is your heart's number one priority, you can trust what you find there. And I believe that that will lead you into a life of integrity because you are living out in faithfulness the good desires He has put in your heart because He is your heart's number one priority. A lesson I've never forgotten and I've always valued, and it's never led me wrong.
Who models for me integrity. I think I learned it at a very early age when my mother was going on a train trip to see her sister, and she took one of my older brothers with her. This brother was 6 years old, and the train ticket was free for children under 6. And the lady at the counter, when my mother went to purchase the ticket, said, "Oh, I think he looks 5. He can go for free." And my mother said, "How can I teach my child not to lie if I agree with that? How much do I owe you?" I had a long career of about 10 years picking strawberries with my grandfather, who took them to the Indianapolis market. In the beginning of that career, at about 8 years old, I picked some berries and I saw a patch of really nice big ones, and I put those on the top of the box, and I proudly took them to grandmother and said, "Here, isn't this a beautiful box of berries? I put the prettiest ones on the top." And she said, "That's a lie, isn't it? Whatever people see on the top needs to be whatever it is all the way through."
Many of us know Paul Anderson. Does anyone know Alvin? Does anyone here know Alvin? Okay. Well, Alvin, and I got to hold on to something or I'll fall. Okay, I'm all right now. But Alvin was my religion. Oh. Alvin was my religion professor. Thank you. I just need to hold on to something. Alvin was my religion professor. And at Malone College back during the 1980s. And Malone College had sent a mission team to somewhere in Central America. And there were other schools as well who had sent a mission team. And we got word back that there had been an airplane accident and some members of that mission team had been killed. Well, we received word that nobody from Malone College was involved. And I said to Alvin, I said, I am so glad that none of our students and faculty and members were killed in that accident. And he said, Mark, we should not be glad about that because there are other people who have lost people. And instead of being glad that we didn't lose anybody, we should be sorrowful for the people who did. And that taught me such a great lesson that we should never rejoice in the misfortune of others.
My dad was wrong about a lot of things, but luckily he lived long enough and we had a relationship that lasted long enough that I got to see him grow and develop and learn to be wrong about a whole new set of things. But where the integrity resided was when I'd ask him a question, he'd always start with, I don't know, Bill, but this is what I think.
Friends, does anyone have anything they feel like they need to share? All right, then let's take a break till 10:45 here. That'll give you 7 or 8 minutes to recollect yourself, and we'll meet back in here. All right, friends, we're going to start to regather here. yesterday we did the kind of doom and gloom, things are declining, people don't really want to push life as much, and today we're going to start getting on the upswing. Younger generations, the sort of cultural waters they're swimming in, we can start to meet some of those needs. My dad and Myron are helping hand out a handout for you, and we're going to go through part of it, but not all of it, and then we're probably halfway through, we're going to split into some small groups and do some discussion together. I emailed you a much longer version of this. If you feel like going through it or want to chat with me about it, I'm happy to do that. But for this discussion, I've done a very simple summary. And this is a zeitgeist summary that was developed by Christian Smith. And that basically just means these are the cultural waters that younger people kind of swim in. These are the generalized belief. Some young people may have very negative reactions against them. Many young people will be, this is just kind of their default set of beliefs. And my hope is that by looking at this, we can find ways to connect with them a little better. So there's 4 summary assumptions that I've put together for you that are just about the general culture. And there's 4 that are specifically religious. And I want to talk a little bit about each one. And I'd love for you, if you have questions, statements you want to make about each one, jump in. I'll pause at the end of each one so we have more of a chance to do that. But the first set of assumptions for this younger generation is that an essential part of what being faithful would be relates to developing the self. And younger people really think they have a self that needs to be developed and explored in a lifelong, it's not a linear process, it's a process with, fits and falls, and that the world is kind of pushing back constantly against that positive development to the self through cultural forces, internal hurts that they've experienced. And the goal is to kind of become a person who's comfortable, able to support others, but is never controlling, draws from a wide range of sources, and relies a lot on personal subjective experience. I think there's a lot of good parts of this that really overlap with Quakerism. Obviously, exploring your spiritual gifts, exploring your vocation fit into this idea of sort of exploring yourself and leaning on what does thee know about this friend, what experiences has God given you, obviously fits into this. There are some negative sides of this for sure as well. You probably all know some young people who are trying to reach some level of like such established, explored self before they have kids or get married or take a risk, and it leads them to just kind of stagnating. And obviously also there's a problem of maybe we focus on the self so much that we don't really focus on wider community at all. But I think this is a huge thing that we will need to be able to support people in exploring themselves if we want to appeal to their own sort of religious beliefs. So, what thoughts come up for you from number 1? And we will ask you to use the mic because there's people online, if you're able. Feel free to jump back to this one, but I'm going to move us to number 2 just in the interest of time. But if you have thoughts that evolve here as we go along, that is great. A big one is about institutions, of which churches would definitely be included, but I think this is really all institutions. They are just not to be trusted. Younger people have, I think all recent generations have had a growing distrust of institutions, but as we talked about yesterday, baby boomers much more inclined to be a part of large groups and institutions than this group is likely to be. And we're going to have to keep that constantly in mind as we are trying to appeal to younger generations. Because the reality is we are and are perceived as churches, as being institutions. I think there's some good Quaker overlap in this, since in my mind, Quakerism was kind of founded in an anti-institutionalist mindset, rebelling against the Anglican Church of its time and focusing in on bringing back the relationship with God to each individual person without intermediary, without grand rules and forms. It seems like that actually fits in really well with our tradition. Thoughts, questions, outrage, anything. Well, you agree? Okay, we good. And I think we do see that a lot. A lot of older generations are also feeling that same sort of distrust and fatigue with institutions now. It would be good if you came to the mic, Carla, and then Mike can come to the mic. That's true. Carla may cover everything Mike was going to say.
I was gonna say just across all the range of the political spectrum, because we have someone in the White House who is also not comfortable with the institution, and people were not happy with the status quo, and that he offered a radical change.
Yeah, I think this is one that's kind of endemic across political, theological lines.
I just wanted to point out that the Lily picture is indicative of why institutions have lost trust. Is that it's been identifiably clear that the root and the product and the stem do not match, and so it's easy once that whole system is identified as inauthentic to dismiss the process of institutions. And because our institutions have people in them, it's more of a people problem than an institution problem.
Thank you. We were actually discussing this last night at a friendship that during the Truman and Eisenhower administrations, we trusted what the government told us, and we trusted Harry and we trusted Ike, but then the Kennedy assassination changed all that, because we knew that the government was lying to us. And then, of course, along came Johnson and Nixon, and then so on and so forth, and now we're politically divided to the point where when we trusted everything that Truman and Eisenhower said, we now just assume we're being lied to. And it doesn't matter whether it was the Biden, Obama, or Trump administration, we're being lied to. And so that political institution then trickles down to all the other institutions, and young people have every reason to believe that they're being lied to.
Mark, you sound like you're a millennial yourself right there. That was excellent. Well, I think tied into some of this distrust of institutions, which obviously affects our churches, is this idea we talked a little bit about yesterday, that modern life just kind of stinks in the perspective of most young people. There's no real sense of economic opportunity, of reaching the American dream. If you talk to younger folks, the sort of just hopelessness about the future is pretty endemic. I talk to a lot of young people who say, like, why would I have kids with the way the environmental crisis is? Why would I have kids when it's impossible to afford them? Getting a new house, all those kinds of things. It's just a really bleak outlook among younger generations at the moment. again, I think there's actually a lot of good Quaker overlap here, and that we are not really supposed to be comfortable with the ways of the world or think that the world is going to solve our problems. And obviously, our hope is supposed to come from a very different place in Jesus than the material solutions that I think were more present or at least more available to previous generations. So there's some opportunity for us to meet that hopelessness with our hope if we can find the right way to frame it. Thoughts, outrage, comments, jokes, general agreement. Yes. No need to push back against. Okay, all right. Jade's coming up with a comment. Go for it. You can come.
Well, this is less of a comment and more of a question that as we continue this discussion, I personally am very interested in those of you who are older, on the older end in this group, what it's been like to watch these changes happen, because I think that your generation has experienced probably more change than any generation in human history. And I think that's part of why we experience this like generation gap in our congregations, because humans have just never changed this rapidly as we have in these years. So I really have loved hearing those reflections as they've come up. And I would love to hear more if you have insights about like, oh yeah, I remember when it was this way and now I'm experiencing it this other way.
I think a follow-up question to what Jade is asking in terms of change, for me, is the question again of immigration. For the folks who've been here or who older enough to understand, will probably explain to us, like, has it always been like this? There's tremendous levels of fear, distrust, and just hate on people who have migrated to this country. And for those of us who have read history, we know that migration to the US has been here as long as the US has existed. And so what has changed? What has changed?
Okay, well, I'm 82 years old. And I want you to know that I find that I'm getting bombarded with overwhelming amounts of information, just like the young people are. And I empathize with them, and I want to hear more from them about how they're dealing with that, because that might help me figure out how I'm going to deal with it. But there is this sense for me of just dark cloud on the horizon, a storm coming, and we don't know what's going to happen by the time the storm has stopped.
And I think the sad reality there is many young people are just not able to deal with the overwhelming amount of information, and we have a lot to offer in that regard. I know Wes Daniels, who leads the Quaker Scholars program, Quaker Leadership Scholars, whatever it is, at Guilford College, is doing a lot of work specifically tackling like how do we interact and live in a digital world as friends. And I think that's something we could really offer the world if we wanted to lean into that. Christy, come on up.
Well, I just have a general statement. When I see there isn't much hope, I went from a dope dealer to a hope dealer. And I don't want to hear people say there is no hope, because our hope is in Jesus. And I have seen miracles happen in people's lives. And is there really anything under the sun that hasn't already been done, as we say? I mean, okay, it's looking more digital these days, but the same struggle, the same heart tugs, the same hopelessness, hope, hold on, pain ends. That's what and I just speak, God, through the power of God, I am able to speak hope into others like I needed it spoken unto me. And I don't know if we believe the word of God, this stuff cannot get to us. Our weapon is prayer, and our weapon is the word of God. And I need to see the word of God, salt and peppered in here. And that's where I go with hopelessness. That's where people taking their own lives in a strange second, when if they would have waited 10 minutes, hope might have sprung up. I think life is hard for all of us, but as an old person, I see the changes in certain things, but I don't think that being overwhelmed is any different. Overwhelm is overwhelm. And that sometimes that starts in our mind. And what I don't want to get into positive affirmations, because that my hope is in the word of God. My hope is, come on. People say, well, I can't read that Bible and understand. Oh, yes, you can. There's so many translations. I'm going to give you a copy of the Message if you think you can't understand what's going on in the Bible. There are so many beautiful translations and paraphrases that I try to get my clients reading what is a best fit for them as far as the Bible. But hold on, pain ends. Don't tell me there's no hope. Come talk to me. If you're in this room and you think, and you're on your last, E in the word hope, come talk to me, because I'm going to tell you some dynamic miracles that have happened. People who lived in their car, people who were out of prison, people who had nothing, but they made something out of what they had. And opportunity, as far as opportunities, that's where we ask for help. We don't do this alone. I don't know. I'm getting off on a tangent now, but don't tell me there's no hope. Get up here. Talk to me. I'm going to tell you some stories of people that looked hopeless, things that looked hopeless. And the power, the supernatural power of God turned that around. And we've got to believe that, or I've got to believe that, and I want to show you.
So I'm going to use that as a transition to this community part, because to get that kind of interaction where you might get some hope, you kind of need the connections of community for that to happen. And for this younger generation, that is rarer and seems harder to get into than kind of ever before. Keep in mind, this is a group that's moving like every 3 years, basically. They're totally disconnected from any kind of organic connection and community. And kind of as Mark was referring to, they have every reason to be distrustful of institutions, communities, more probably than previous generations have had. And they have a deep sense that communities are often out there to manipulate them, to take advantage of them, because they have seen that so much in their lives. And they feel like communities are places where conflict is likely to happen. People are likely to control you. They grew up without many of these younger generations grew up without any kind of tradition at all to connect into. This is really getting into the generations who've never really spent any time at church at all, for many people. And they have no sense of a tradition that could guide them in any way. And in fact, while some of that may seem appealing, they're a little bit like, whoa, I have no experience with that at all. There's just a short quote from Christian Smith here, kind of summing it up, that it's natural for this group to crave strong relationships in community, but that desire is counteracted by not knowing what that looks like, how to find it, busyness, hesitation to commit, and lots of negative past experiences. So it ties in together to say, like, there is a lot of hesitation and distrust with groups like ours that we are really going to have to overcome and prove ourselves if we want to build connection. We got Alicia, okay, this is good. Now people are fighting to get up here.
So first, Brown, to what you were saying about why is it different? There's significant changes happening in our country, in the world, and the people in power are not going to just let that go. I mean, they are going to hold on to it. And we've seen it in our history time and again. But the reality is they can't stop it. I mean, it is just happening all over the place. We're melding races and people, and it's not going to stop. I mean, my daughter-in-law is from Colombia, so I have a grandson who's part Colombian, part United States. It's happening everywhere. So, but they are going to fight it. And again, we've seen it, you know. I've read, when I was reading about Fever in the Heartland and how the KKK, right here in Indiana, you know, who would have thought in the 20s that this would have happened? So we do have to hold on to it. There's going to be dark clouds ahead, but it's not going to stop. It's just not, because things are dramatically changing. And I would say I agree with all four assumptions. I think there's huge opportunity in all four.
Enormous opportunity, for sure.
I mean, while community is hard and rare to find, I believe young people are craving it.
Yes.
They're craving it. So we got to be a kind of place, and I think we can be.
Yes.
That we are like, come as you are. There's no, you don't have to check this box or that box. Come as you are. So I see huge opportunity in all four.
Yes.
So that makes me really encouraged.
We are better placed to meet these than I think basically any other religious group.
So on the institution piece, I mean, I think in a lot of these, and what Beth was saying, that, you know, when people see all this change happening, they sort of hold on to the things they think they can control. And I don't know if you've had this experience, but like my meeting has been trying to consolidate its committee structure for like 15 years. And I think we finally managed to like combine two committees together. Or if you've ever tried to be like, maybe we should have the kids come at the beginning instead of like, I think that even in our own communities, there can be that resistance to like, how do we adapt? Because there's a sense of like, this is what Quakerism is. And so I think being aware of when we feel that kind of institutional like attachment in our own communities and being able to work through that. But on the community piece, I wanted to say, I think, like, I look at my oldest kid who's 19. They have incredible community. It is all online. It is all in Discord. It is like, you know, they very rarely socialize with people in person, and in fact are somewhat uncomfortable with that. But they have a lot of friends all over the place that they're connected with. And so I think I agree that people are craving that in-person community, but I don't want to discount the ways that people are finding community in different ways, even if it looks different than going to church and, you know, being with people. And then the second thing I'll say on that is, you know, for my kids, we're in Baltimore yearly meeting, and the camping program has been the most amazing source of community for them, and has translated into the Young Friends program in our meeting. And like, there are many Sundays where my kids want to go to meeting more than I do. So I also think that, you know, you have this amazing resource at Quaker Haven, and like thinking about ways that those kinds of, like, they're not exactly mountaintop experiences, but they're kind of like really special coming together experiences that then can feed other kinds of community.
I'll put on my scout cap for a minute because I have to do it. I'm at camp. And everybody says I should be doing really well camping in that cabin when the temperatures are so low at night, I'm freezing.
But one of the things that I always had trouble, we talked about community service with the Scouts and explaining to kindergarten, first, second, third graders, what is community? Where can you do community service? And getting that through their head. Your neighborhood, your school, your church, the town we live in, the county we live in. Those are different communities that you belong to. So between institutions and community, I guess I'm going to kind of throw it together, partially because of the situation I've had this week online. Communities need to be flexible. You can't be so rigid that you're unwilling to stop and make a change in your schedule. Don't tell me that your worship schedule is set and you can't take 2 minutes out of one meeting when you have 3 meetings for worship in the morning to recognize a young friend for their accomplishment. When that accomplishment has to do with their faith and something they've worked on for months to earn that award, and you can't take 2 minutes to recognize them in front of the congregation. You kick it down to children's church to recognize this little second grader. And it's broken my heart this week to hear that. It's not here locally. It's in a humongous, from what it looks like online, evangelical friends meeting. And my heart is broken for this second grader and his family because they were told, we can't change the worship schedule. Not today, not next week, not next month to do this. It's going to be done in children's church. You got to be flexible. You've got to roll with the punches, and you've got to take care of your community, or you're going to lose them. And I wouldn't blame this family if they walked out of that church and never went back.
And that is an excellent segue to one of our later points. We're going to talk about how flexibility is very important. I want to move on to these religious takeaways, 4 sets of assumptions here. One is about sort of wider religious truth. And I think this is something that younger people are really not terribly interested in. This is going to come up in this point and the next set of assumptions. Young people want something that is practical to their lives specifically, that helps them with what they are doing, and these larger cultural debates about religion and religious belief tend to really annoy them and scare them off. They don't want anything to do with that kind of discussion. And I'm going to just jump to this next one too, and then we can have some discussion, because younger generations are really looking for a religion in the world. They want things that address their lives right now, and they're not as interested in those big debates, but also questions about the afterlife, none of us are doing the how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, but there are a lot of things that we do and talk about that can feel that way to younger generations. So keeping our faith life very practical for their lives is very critical. And not focusing so much on things that are just perpetual conflicts is very critical.
So just an aside, we restructured committees into us, them, and stuff. And small meeting, it worked really well. And when we presented it at quarterly meeting, there were people who said they had heard we had done this and they were offended that. But then when they heard our state of society and how it came to be, and it was, the words came from a grade school teacher. And so there is hope for that. This is really a combination that community is hard and rare and religious truth. My child went to church all the time growing up, and I get the mom, I don't believe in God, as a young adult. And now the important thing is that we can talk about it. And so now, does he have the values? Does he live them out? Do I see that? And one of my biggest concerns is that then he doesn't have that religious community that I grew up with and I knew that was there for me. And so then what kind of community is he going to find such that he moved from Chicago to Portland. And my concern was that he wasn't having some of that face-to-face community. And as we talk about it, he will report in, okay, I started doing this, I've started doing that. And so how do we have that religious community of these people who have faith that can move mountains and that you know that you can count on them? I don't know that his communities are going to be that strong. And so how do we take this opportunity, Beth, as you said, to all are welcome, and we can come at this from different ways, and we don't judge that, but we get to what's the foundation for this?
Yeah. And I mean, I do think it's important to note that I know it happens somewhat in Western, that a lot generations of younger folks stop participating because some of the conflicts that happened. But I really want to focus in on Northwest yearly meeting, which somebody should write a book about this. I think they had an incredible spiritual gift for raising up leaders like no other yearly meeting has had. Like, we have several of them here. There was just something special about it. And when they had their split and conflicts, a whole generation of people, tons of people, just disappeared and ceased participating and is just gone. We may have some opportunity to bring people like that back, but we should be very wary about the ways these conflicts and focusing on the big things rather than the ways they're playing out in people's lives cause us to lose so many folks. I knew that was going to get Mike Sherman up.
One of the things that Friends believe is that each of us is a bearer of God's image, that we all hold the divine within us. The first point on the list on the sheet was that young people identify their self first, and they work to protect that primarily before they do anything else in engagement. When we enter into conflict and we do not respect the self, we do not respect the divine that we see walking around in front of us, they cannot believe we recognize God. They can't do it. We, older than me, we experience the presence of God differently. We experience the presence of God more in a collective sense, that this is what we are doing together. When young people enter into a place where, as the leadership in an organization does not acknowledge and value the God in that other person, they cannot experience the presence of God in the larger group, because that thing just undermines the integrity of what we say as a community, that God rests in Rex. And so if I cannot respect Rex, whatever agreement we have, then what I am saying is I do not respect God. And so when our conflicts come to a position where in Northwest Yearly Meeting you had a whole group of people leave, it's because they're asking that question. This group of people is looking to grab a hold of something that is not God in order to preserve something that maybe somebody hopes represents God, but has abandoned that thing. And I'm not, I don't, that's not my necessarily experience of what it means to be in community, but I know it's my kids' experience. They are looking to figure out how the thing they know as themselves is identified as divine. And when their faith community says clearly that it's not, they're not giving up on God. They are saying the community is giving up on God.
And that is an excellent segue to talking about some of the younger people's views of religious organizations more broadly. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that, along what Mike was just saying, any hypocrisy between what we say and what we do is going to be extremely damaging to us, more than other organizations. We make big claims about our values, and every time we fail on those, we're going to do damage that takes us years to repair. Alongside that, younger people, there's no longer widespread trust and acceptance of church. Young people think churches need to get out in their communities and prove their worth. This is going to be very important for tomorrow. We need to be able to get out in our communities and demonstrate our values for people to see. It's no longer an assumption that we actually do that. And going alongside that, people don't think that churches are necessarily necessary for having spiritual lives. And like I was saying, they're worried about them being manipulative. And going to Luann's point, communities really need to be flexible. I listed here that you're probably not going to get people every Sunday. That is not going to be a possibility. You probably are going to need to change your services sometimes to meet the needs and expectations of other people. Rachel had an excellent example of this as well. Do you want me to just summarize it? She can't even remember. Yes, so... wait.
Yeah, I remember now.
Okay.
This was a couple of years ago when we lived in Seattle. My spouse and I were on a board for a nonprofit preschool, and we knew we couldn't each of us be at every meeting. So what we did was say to the preschool, like, we as a couple will take one board seat, and we promise that one of us will be at the meeting, and sometimes both of us, but we will communicate, but we are one vote. And it totally worked great for the preschool. We had 3 kids, like under 6 at the time. And so then we were part of a church. It wasn't a Quaker meeting. We were part of a church. And they, for months and months and months, were like, we want a young person on the council, on the ministry and council. Like, we need somebody volunteer. I mean, constantly, every Sunday, announcements. So finally, Sean and I discerned, like, okay, we're done with the preschool board. Like, we could do this. Like, I work a lot of nights, so like, but I'm near the church on some of those nights. Like, we really, really thought about it. So we went to the church and said, we've done this before. It really worked well for us. It was a really good model for including, you'd have really 2 opinions of a young couple with children, but we are so busy, we'll just take one spot and one vote. And they were like, oh no, like, we're not going to do that. And we were like, and we left the church over that, because it was like, for us, it was like, they don't actually want young people. They didn't want to work with our realities. And it was the like, we're desperate for people, but we're inflexible with people. It was like, and I think that happens all the time.
All right, let's let Josiah go, and then Jade can go.
It was interesting viewing some of the presentations from Myron's workshop last night, and hearing from some of the younger people, especially around their involvement in committee work, that they really wanted to be involved in the organizations of the church. And like Luann was saying about worship, I think we also need to be flexible in our business structure. It sort of breaks my heart to hear that some of our own leadership at Fairfield is feeling pressure in that way. And so I think that's a challenge to those of us from our meeting to go back and try to make it better and more accessible to those people that are coming new to our meeting, thinking about ways in which they might be able to contribute to the work of the meeting, but also ways in which we invite them as well.
Which, quick plug in between Jade getting up here, just to say, the Western Yearly Meeting Finance Committee really needs some young people if you would like to serve. Emmons, yes, also our Ministering Council.
Every meeting needs a young treasurer, I think. So I don't know if I've shared this before in this group, but in any case, I became a Quaker as a young person, having been raised non-religious and not ever knowing Quakers. And the way that I did was by seeing the movie A Friendly Persuasion on television. And when I saw that movie, which I watched on TV by myself, I was an only child, I watched it by myself, and I kind of joke about this, right? But in reality, I had a profound experience where in the scene where they're having meeting for worship and the little boy gets up and says, God is love, I felt in my heart at that time, what these people are saying is true, and these are my people. And so, I think in many ways, my story is like very much the sort of classical Quaker story, right? In that I had this solitary individual experience that then led me to reach out and connect with friends. And I was too young to like connect on my own, but it just so happened that I met a girl who was my age, and we were 12 or so, and when we were talking, she said, my family's Quaker. And I was like, I'm Quaker also. So after that, I attended meeting for worship with them, and that's how I became a friend. And so in some ways, that's sort of the traditional story, but I also feel like it's actually so peculiar, particularly for my generation, that people start by sort of this like seeking individual experience and then reach out and connect to the community. And yet our communities are still kind of like expecting or hoping. We have that model in our brain, right? Of like, this is what's supposed to happen. And so we're like waiting for the young seekers to show up. And what I think a lot of people are speaking to here today is something that I've learned since in my, how many years has it been? 30 years since then, which is that most people don't experience God that way. Most people's experience of God actually comes from how other people treat them. And there's actually not a difference for most people in how they've been treated by Christians and their relationship to God. And unfortunately, that's sort of the way we're wired. I don't know why, but it seems like they're just in people's actual lived real experience. It just seems like that's how it works. So when we can show love to people who are not Christians or not interested in religion and things like that, it often shifts their view. And by the same token, when we are harmful or closed to people, they can't experience God through us. So all
right, Jade, I'm cutting you off as your husband. We've got one more here before the kids go. One more here. Can I cut you off because we have one more and the kids? We're at our closing time.
I'm at my closing time. And in the case of Northwest Yearly Meeting, we had like this incredible like group of leaders who I viewed as like my role models. And when you say like, who is your role model of integrity? My brain still goes back to those leaders. And I would say maybe 4/5 of those leaders or more are no longer in leadership at all. They maybe attend meeting, but they have ceased putting themselves out there in that way. And when we don't live out our faith that we talk about, then that's blasphemy. And it's very, very harmful. It can be so harmful to other people's faith journey. So.
Okay. Last one here. Tied in with these other assumptions. a lot of groups have been tainted by participation with some very negative ways of the world, colonialism, racism. We heard about Fever in the Heartland already. These are stories that younger folks are more aware of now and will hold against us. So we have to sort of work to counteract those. Alongside that, people are really looking for a lot of room to explore their beliefs and explore other religious beliefs as well. And as one friend has already sort of referred to, it's really important that our meetings remain Christ-centered, remain working in the spirit of God, but a lot of these younger folks are going to have grown up in situations where having done Buddhist meditation, totally normal. Gone to a Diwali festival with their friend, totally normal. Going to various Jewish celebrations, totally normal. So there's much more cultural interchange than there was, and that's something that younger generations are going to expect. Doing yoga as a spiritual practice, endemic. It's just something that is going to be normal for them now, and we are going to need to adapt ourselves to meet that. Okay, the rest of this is mostly something I use when talking to young people to give them a sense of, well, this is what it was like for older generations, so it's probably not as relevant for you. I will send you the queries that we were going to talk about in small groups. And you can make your own small groups this afternoon and talk about them if you want to. And tomorrow we will figure out ways to lean into some of these opportunities together. But for now, the kids are back and you have 30 minutes of free time before lunch. We could probably, why don't you go do that with Hyro? Hyro. Well, can you go up to the Capitol Lodge? Yeah. I think anything works.